The Life of Death by Nightmare Darkness. Read by Deathlight. Chapter 5. Starvation of Love.
How could they be so sickly? I thought to myself as I walked along the cobblestone road. Changelings walked to and fro, seeming without hope or direction. My robe gently tugged me, showing me the way. There was no laughter, no smiling, and no love. I stopped in front of a seemingly beaten house, covered with dirt and grime. I pushed open the door to find the way inside equally dirty. The air was heavy with a metallic taste. I proceeded down the hall and through the door to see a mother and two fillies. They were skinnier than the others. The mother was brushing their leathery manes with kindness that spoke volumes to me. And again, I found my heart being squeezed by the sadness. Soon they would die, but that is why I am here. The other filly coughed and closed her eyes as she nuzzled into her mother's bony chest. "Mom, where's the love? Queen Crystal is said." The filly on the left began, but seemed to have no strength to finish her thought. The mother looked down at them and smiled weakly. "Don't fret, it seems that the good queen's noble plan has been foiled by some ponies." Her voice seemed to spew venom, but her fiery anger withered. "I know a lot has happened, my darlings, but where we'll be going, the love will be boundless. So be good when the grim pony comes. Embrace the darkness, for it is only another beginning," she said, looking up to the ceiling, not having the courage to look into her own daughter's eyes. Something told me it was her time. I reached forth my scythe and touched her gently. Her soul left her body as the mother began to cry. A single tear ran down her cheek, and soon it was her daughter next. Her breathing slowed as she rested her head against her guardian. I quickly placed my scythe on her forehead, withdrawing her soul. The mother looked at her lifeless fillies and began to sob as her body began to shake. The first filly was bewildered and looked at me as I touched my scythe last to her mother. Her sobs began to quiet and her body slumped forward. Her body seemed like it was protecting them, even in death. I stood there, like a statue, as the ghosts of the family looked at each other and then looked at me. The mother began to become protective. I felt a feeling of warmth as the air clarified, much like a center of a forest. There, at the other side of the light, a masculine changeling observed his ghostly family before him and smiled.
"It's nice to see you, love,"
he said. "Dad!" The two fillies exclaimed and ran towards him, tackling him to the ground with hugs. I couldn't help myself, and I smiled with a small laugh. The changeling mare looked up at me with a small smile. "Thank you," she said, and walked into the light with her husband and children. Just as quickly as it happened, the light left the room and I was alone again. I looked at the bodies of the mare and the fillies inside. I felt happy, but sad at the same time. It was odd to say, I mourned the dead, yet at the same time say I felt happy for them. As I was about to open the door with my key, life seemed to stir in the populace, causing me to pause. A large changeling flanked by a contingent of guards landed in the square. I exited the home and made my way to see what the commotion was. The changeling queen, her face a calm visage, but I could discern the grief behind her militaristic form. Bags under her eyes with stains of tears. "My children, I have failed you. I promised to have us fed better than a king, but through my callousness, I have failed you." She paused. Her look became galvanized as smoke began to swarm around her. I frowned. No pony was acting any different. Maybe it was a show of dominance, I guess. But soon that assumption was replaced by shock and horror as red demonic eyes appeared by her ear. My blood, if it was pumping at all, ran cold. "We as a species have lived in the shadows long enough. No longer will you and others starve. I call you, my subjects, to arms. I will declare war on Equestria, and we will fight until every home is fed, and every changeling is happy," she declared. Her subjects got caught up in her speech and cheered. I looked around at the madness that was present with a horror. Open war! Are they serious? My mind raced. I had to tell Celestia, or any pony. I ran to a door. As the smoke noticed me, I flew in front of me with wicked speed. I stopped dead and leveled my scythe. It recoiled in fear and hissed at me.
"You're too late, Dad. Soon you'll have too much to deal with. When we meet next, it will be my true form."
It flew skyward and over the house upon giving the warning. I quickly took out my key and thrust it into the lock, turning it thinking of naught but Celestia, but simply entered and came face to face with the room full of ponies. Celestia in court. As soon as I stepped into the room, Celestia and Luna looked at me. I began to approach and Luna shook her head and I stopped. Celestia turned to Luna and whispered something and she nodded. Luna stood up and gestured for me to follow. I walked through the crowded room, through the populace of ponies, and met up behind Luna as soon as she left the room. She led me to a study where she nodded for the guards to close the doors. Being in a room with royalty wasn't the craziest thing I've done all day. Death, why did you come? She asked me with what seemed to be a bit more focus than what was necessary. I was just collecting the souls of some changelings. I began, but stopped as Luna made a sound of disgust. Ugh, I do not know why you collect the souls of such creatures, she said. It disturbed me how callous she was, even at the mention of them. What I had witnessed and felt with the family of changelings would prove her otherwise, had she experienced it. Because they have souls worth saving, I found myself saying, and blinked back surprised at myself. Luna looked at me and waved her hoof. Well, what do you want? She said, seemingly more reserved. The Changeling Queen will declare war in Equestria, I said. When the words of open war left my lips, her eyes went wide and became pinpricks. You lie. We have defeated the creatures when they try to attack Camelot, she said, assurance in her voice. I glared at her as I pulled back my hood, and she became uneasy. I could only imagine it was me as a skeleton. If you don't listen to me, many good ponies and changelings will die. I've been at this for a little less than a day, and I'm already having to deal with this? I exclaimed. Luna looked at me with a cocked eyebrow. You are not Tootsie? She asked, surprised. Do I look like Tootsie? I asked sarcastically. Well, you have no skin. How am I supposed to know? She said. I pulled my hood back up and down again, and she visibly changed. What is your name? She asked. Grapevine, came a regal voice of Celestial walking into the room. Both Luna and I turned to look at her. The door closed behind her as she approached. She says the Changeling Queen will declare war, Luna said sarcastically. Celestia frowned in concern and disbelief. I am surprised that the new death is bringing me news of such weight, when only on the job for less than a day. If what you say is true, I'll get my agents to look into it, she said as she walked past me and Luna, taking her place behind the desk. If what she says is true, we must muster our forces and prepare for an attack, Luna said. Celestia nodded in agreement. Begin battle preparations, Luna. Luna nodded and left the room promptly. I stood there looking at Celestia as she wrote a message, rolled it up, and it disappeared with a puff of smoke, then looked at me. I'm glad I chose you, she said, smiling. Why? Why me? I'm no pony special. I was glad, but still unsure. I have a hunch about you, and usually my hunches have merit. She chuckled. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Typical politic tactic. Tell them something but not the truth. I'm glad you brought this to my attention, but you still have much work to do. Please go and remove the pain from suffering ponies, she said. I sighed, lifting my hood up and walking to the door. While lifting my key, I looked at my scroll. Sound Melody, 97, Heart Attack. I opened the door and walked into a lightly lit room, where several ponies stood around a bedridden old stallion. A dark gray-coated mare with a nicely combed black mane attended, with a pink bow tie around her neck as she stood behind him. Grandpa, she said sadly. He smiled at her. Don't worry, Octavia. I had a wonderful life. A tear rolled down Octavia's cheek as she held his hoof. In the room, there were several ponies looking downtrodden. The emotion in the room was palpable. I stilled myself again. I was gonna take another life. Okay, where to start on this? Well, I was a bit confused with some parts, to be frankly honest. Like, when she actually opened the door, why didn't she just face through? That was a bit odd to me, so. And also, we're finally getting the actual thing going on, the actual plot line going on throughout the story, which is really exciting to see. So, we can tell by later, she's going to be later combating the Black Mist. And it's saying it's going to be a really powerful opponent, so I'm hoping towards the end of it, it's not going to be a huge flop and there's going to be nothing to it. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking for the next few chapters. I've actually read ahead a couple of chapters just to get ahead on some of the things which you will see in the following weeks, so I'll see you there.